care about current affairs, it's on the Oshow. And when you want to get clear what's going on here, it's on the Oshow. If you like to stay in the know, tune yourself into the Oshow. It's the Oshow. Laura Babcock.
Welcome to the Oshow, Canada's current affairs show with strong opinions. And we have got the scandal panel back. They were supposed to be on vacation, but Doug Ford and his Ontario-made summer is making us go back to work because we can't just all barbecue and drink beer when he's wrecking our province. So we will get into Doug Ford's summer of barbecue, beer, and bullshit in just a minute. But first, I want to give a little bit of a warning out there, Canada. There is a white supremacist group that is starting to have rallies across the country. Yes, it's real. It's true. It's not fake. They had one near the Ottawa area. People in the town didn't realize what it was, regret it now, and denounce it. So one planned for our city, Hamilton, on July 31st, and already a city councillor has denounced it, as we are hoping that all of the civic leaders across the country will do. We will have a show on the rise of white supremacy and racism before that event, and we'll have Kojo Damptey on the program. So that is coming up on the Oshow. It's a Canada-wide problem, not just this group, but other groups across the country. We want to end hate here on the Oshow and always stand up and speak up for the people who are the most marginalized and the most targeted among our society. And that's what we're going to do. So tune in for that. Okay, guys, as I said off the top, barbecues, beer, bullshit. I can't take it anymore. You guys saw all the crap coming out of Camp Ford in the last few days. And so you were great to once again scramble the jets of the scandal panel so we can keep up with everything that's happening. I'm going to start with you, Keith Leslie, of course, Queen's Park veteran journalist, and then we'll get to Mark Cripps, who both worked inside of the Ontario government in communications, but also a journalist in his own right. So Keith, let's start with you before I get on an unholy rant, which I am dying to do, as are many of the people in Ontario, I am sure. What was your take with, you can start with the Lcbo strike, you can start with the more bullshit around the Science Center, you can start with the mega mansions in Muskoka. I mean, what do you want to talk about in what's supposed to be this sleepy month of July?
Let's start with the Lcbo, because this strike, basically now a week old already, was clearly engineered by the government. The Lcbo coming out and saying, we're going to be closed for 14 days as a minimum just to start this thing. Clearly that's because the government does not want any Lcbo customers confronting a picket line. Just don't. Restaurant and bar owners, that's a whole different thing. And they you know, when the union said they were going to picket those distribution sites, boom, they were shut down too, and they can now order online. And you've got a situation where bars and restaurants are being able to order like 2 bottles of whiskey when they normally would order, you know, maybe not a case if they're not that big, but, you know, many more. Anyway, it's turned into a bit of a crap show for sure. But the union, I think, is really making the wrong stand on this. Doug Ford came out, you know, he looked really bad with this, the video that was obviously prepared ahead of time. You know, you're going to pick your burgers, we're going to go buy Ontario, but well, the store is closed. How you're directing the Lcbo to sell more Ontario stuff in a letter, and yet they're closed.
For anyone who might have missed it, it was the premiere in the cheesiest of all cheesy videos, and he has done a number of these cheesy cooking videos. This one at a big fancy deck at a barbecue telling us, hey, folks, in his big blue apron, you know, this is the Ontario, made in Ontario summer. Lots of barbecue, going to be lots of beer, lots of booze coming. It was met with the derision it deserved, and God knows it's a waste of our tax dollars once again to do these stupid propaganda videos on his dumb schemes. But go ahead.
Well, they clearly want to get us prepared for buying booze everywhere but the Lcbo. So Doug Ford, as well as this really cheesy video that you mentioned, and, you know, grab an Ontario beverage of some sort wherever you can buy them because there's no shortage of places. I mean, we also had the Premier and the government putting out an interactive map of where you can go buy booze during the Lcbo strike. Now, with, you know, they just led with their chin on that one. With 2.5 million Ontarians without a family doctor, the union and the opposition parties were pretty quick to pounce with, how about an interactive map where we could get primary health care?
Yeah.
You know, boy, they really, I think
Or an
that one was
interactive
really,
map of ERs that are open, Keith, because as
oh, for-
Ghost Gurney posts all the ER closings across rural Ontario. And hold on, did I miss it when I was hunting for vaccines for my family and we had to have volunteers, Vaccine Hunters Canada, tell us where we could find them in Ontario? Ford couldn't put interactive maps together for any of the things that actually fucking matter, but he can do it overnight for beer? Give me a break. Sorry. Go ahead.
well, again, who in Ontario was saying, geez, if only there was some place else I could buy a White Claw, because I have to go to the liquor store for God's sakes. That's just so outrageous. Now, the premier, in his defense, he was really good at this at the news conference. If the union, I think, is making a mistake, drawing a line in the sand at these ready mixed cocktails, and saying, they're spirit based, we should only be the ones selling spirits. And Ford was pretty clear. No, no, you're not directing us on policy on this. We're going to allow those ready mixed cocktails to be sold in corner stores, gas stations, the big box stores. They're only 9% of the market. And if you think, you should be able to hold on to at least 5% of that with the number of stores you have, what are you making this a line in the sand for? And I have to agree with them with that. It's not something voters are going to go, oh, geez, I want my, pre-mixed cocktail. I want to be able to buy that at the gas station. As the government said, it's just for the union to make that their line in the sand. I think full-time jobs, when so many are part-time, would be a much better issue. And Ford addressed that, right? He said, we're addressing the wages, we're addressing job security, and we're addressing the full-time thing. So I think this is a fight the union has picked. But despite, I think, it being a goal of the government in the first place, and there's no rush to settle this thing because, they've got lots of messaging they can put out on all their changes that they're making, even though they spent $250 million minimum so we could get these pre-mixed drinks and beer and wine in the corner stores this August 1st instead of next year.
But they spent up the number coming out of the opposition party's $1 billion booze doggle is, I think, what they've come up with. He spent a fortune. Ford spent a fortune of our money that needs to go to healthcare, obviously, money that needs to go to homelessness, obviously, money that needs to go to autism families, obviously, money that needs to go to people with disabilities on ODSP, obviously. He spent that money on breaking a contract so that he could speed up the stupid crap in corner stores plan he has for booze so he can call an early election. We've talked about it before, guys. The fact of the matter is this isn't without consequence for the Ontario taxpayer. Even if people don't like that union line in the sand, and I want to know your thoughts on that too, Mark. I see you nodding to Keith's point. The union should be talking about the 9,000 jobs and how important it is to have good local jobs in the economy. And this is a union busting tactic by this premier. We've seen it before. And they should be talking about what I see as the biggest value proposition, the $2.5 billion that was going back into healthcare and the public sector coffers as a result of the Lcbo operation. I grew up in Montreal. I was used to having booze accessible in corner stores. This is not an ideological thing about where you can find alcohol for me. This is about the premier once again taking money from the public sector, putting it into the private sector. There's a freaking Loblaws family member, a Weston, on the board of the Lcbo. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that this is more of Doug Ford's plan to privatize the province. Mark?
Well, the irony of the map, the first thing I thought when I saw the map is, okay, so you're basically saying that beer and wine and, alcohol is already widely available throughout the province, in every corner of the province. And we need to liberalize it even more by blowing $1 billion to get it into corner stores quickly. I'm like, who's running the comm shop in that? They are taking us for freaking fools, or they're fools. I don't know which one it is, but that was my first reaction. I know this. I worked under the premier who liberalized alcohol sales in this province more than anyone ever did, and that was Kathleen Wynne. Yeah. So, with all due respect, this alcohol is widely available, and I never really understood this inconvenience, or I never heard people clamoring for it. And then we're like, and then we deal with all these other issues that are going on right now, which need immediate help, which need immediate funding. And it just
But they
seems
don't get the videos, do they? There's
No,
no
because-
video for
because-
autism families, right? Here's how you can find your autism services. No interactive map for that. There's no map for, hey, ODSB people who are about to be rent
No.
evicted because you can't eat. Here's a way to find a way to top up your ODSB payments. So it's not just the argument about whether or not we need this change, Mark. It's the fact that he is putting so much energy and effort into something that is not important to Ontario.
As a teetotaler, he's a teetotaler. And in his biggest public policy initiative since coming to power, he came to power on a booze promise, and he's just riding this booze promise, and he's a freaking teetotaler, which that should tell you everything you need to know how this is not about the Ontario people. This is about what this government has done is they're taking public institutions, they are breaking them, they're smashing them into smithereens in an effort to hand over the proceeds of that to business and people like the Convenience Store Association, who have long time lobbies of the provincial Conservative government. But the irony of this, and this is what I think people don't understand, and this is where I really struggle with people debating this issue. Number one, if you're a conservative and you think blowing whether it's $300 million or $1 billion is good fiscal policy, like you need to really check your politics. Secondly, people are under the illusion that somehow liberalizing booze sales is going to make things cheaper. It isn't. When the booze goes into the corner stores, it's going to be sold at a premium price, because Ford has said he will not control. He has no intention to. It'll be a threshold at the bottom, but people will be able to charge whatever they want. People think somehow liberalizing booze sales is going to drive down the price of booze. It won't. It's going to make booze more expensive because it's going to send it out to a profit model where people are going to do what they do, like with groceries and everything else we've experienced over the last few years, and we are all going to pay more. And then there's going to be less money coming into the coffers. So and I agree with Keith about the union. I think there's too many ideologues that are in that union, and they I get what they're trying to do. They're trying to make a stand. God bless them. They're trying to say like enough's enough with Doug and this policy, but he's outflanking them, and it's sad. And I feel bad.
He came out today with the line that he's getting calls from all kinds of workers. It sounds very Trumpian garbage.
Heard that before.
Yeah, exactly.
I think a big concern here as well is, do not think, despite the premiers and the finance minister insisting that the LCBO is an integral part of this system, there's no way we're looking to privatize it. Do you honestly think that the grocery stores and the big box stores are going to stop at this? Or are they going to be selling the bottles of spirits?
That's right.
Which are the biggest profit items that there are in all of this. Although I think those ready-made drinks are pretty profitable too. But the bottles of spirits, and they're lobbyists. We know they're going to be lobbying for this. And the more of this that we get, the minute that the big box stores and Loblaws and Sobeys and all these places can start selling spirits, bottles of spirits and wines and everything, the LCBO will end up being a distribution center.
Yeah.
And a wholesaler, which is a good role for it. And perhaps, ideologically, there can be arguments about that. And we're seeing it already. But the best argument that everyone puts forward, and Laura, you mentioned it, the $2.5 billion dividend that comes back to the province from the LCBO as it currently exists. They have, I think it's 677 stores. And I know people that just love those stores. They love that magazine. They know it's, there's a lot of money going into this. It's a slick production. There's very little retail done at that level, but also very little retail where you get the kind of product knowledge you can get in an LCBO store.
Yeah.
Where you go in and people, they know their stuff. They really do. Ask anyone in Canadian Tire, they go over there. They just point.
I have a young chef in the house who's not legal age to consume alcohol, but always needs to have a pairing for his dishes. And I don't know anything about it other than it tastes good. So I count on the LCBO to get me the fine wines and whatever else to match. And also go there enough to know the people and know that they are fighting for their jobs, right? But I have found, just from a narrative point of view, the thing that seems to resonate the most with Ontarians is that dividend. We've already seen Ford, devouring his barbecued burgers and his beer whatever it is that he drinks, but it's the fact that he's devouring our healthcare system. He is literally, I've used the word before, it's like it's being cannibalized. It is being absolutely eviscerated. It is being taken down to the bone. He's paying nursing agencies with affiliations to his party 3 times as much to bring nurses back into these hospitals. It is our public system, as you said, our public structures are being taken down, they are being broken, they are being devastated to profit private sector pals who then put money back in the PC coffers, hence the reason why they keep winning. So let me just move to another absolute bunch of bullshit that came out from Ford in the last week and a half, and it is the Science Center. If there isn't a better example of literally destroying an institution in Ontario under a bogus premise. For what? I think it's because that land is mighty valuable. Look at who has adjoining land plots around it. Another one of these names we've been hearing about since forever with this Ford government, since the Greenbelt scandal. So they're in a huge rush to shut down the Science Center for a roof that needed to be repaired in October, where private citizens had offered to pay the repairs. A hue and cry came out. No one bought that bullshit. We all know what it's about. It's about that land. It's about putting a small science center in Ontario Place to justify the $1 billion underwater garage for the casino that we all know is coming as well. I mean, we are living in this world where the gaslighting is choking us as Ontarians. We know what is happening. The same names, the same players, the same Ford pals are taking the profits from our public institutions, even our Lcbo. There is a plan to take what they can from the people of Ontario while they have power and to fund future power. We've seen it so many times since the Greenbelt scandal, it is freaking obvious. And what's not obvious to me is, where is the RCMP investigation? Where is it? How many more times do the people of Ontario have to feel like we're getting kicked in the stomach by these schemes and these scandals and this corruption before we hear even an update on the fact that they're looking to the original scandal of the Greenbelt? So the Ontario Science Center, the whole plan, guys, wasn't selling. Nobody bought it. Architects, it's not true. We'll build it. We'll fix it. We'll do it for free. Rich people, we'll pay for it. We care about kids, science programs, neighborhood. What does the government come out with just today, Ford? Apparently there's a new report, guys. The cost is massive. The whole thing was about to implode. I mean, who believes any of this shit? Sorry, to you, Keith. Go ahead.
I sat through the 90-minute briefing this morning in the question and answer. It marked it too, I got.
Yeah.
Holy
You're my
cow.
heroes. That's why you're here.
Oh, geez. All of a sudden, it's not just the roof panels. There's just so much else. The place, they didn't use the word decrepit that the Premier used yesterday, but they might as well have. I mean, they reviewed the original engineering report, and these aerated concrete panels are going to kill us all. There's asbestos everywhere. You can't do the remedial work. You absolutely can't. The bridge has been closed for 2 years. What is criminal here, and I really do think it's criminal, is both the previous government and this one just allowing this place, the bridge, the pedestrian bridge that we all remember from going there and shocking our classmates on the carpet and all that. It's been closed for 2 years.
Yeah.
The heating doesn't work. That's why they have the October 31st deadline. The heating doesn't work anymore. They can't get them. So this briefing today was just, holy cow, I want to go demolish the place myself. I mean, it's just, the way they made it sound, it was just completely unsafe. But when we pushed, when the reporters pushed, what does decommission mean? Does it mean demolish? No. Safely decommission. So we're not. One other thing we found out today is that part of the, you remember there was so much, only a limited amount of percentage of floor space was dedicated to exhibits. Well, another large part was dedicated to the fabrication plant, where they make displays for science centers around the world. So a reporter today very keenly, is there going to be room in Ontario Place for this new fabrication? Are you going to keep we're going to keep the fabrication plant. Is there going to be, well, no, we're going to need another location for that. So all of a sudden now we're looking at a second, and we don't even know how many hundreds of thousands of square feet building to. So this stuff is back of the napkin, just flying through the system. And another reporter pushed, because the chairman of the board, and the board said, he read the letter, the board supports this closing immediately. It was just so bad. And a reporter pushed and said, you, chair, and over half the board are donors to the PC party. Well, how do we think you didn't just like rubber stamp this and say, okay, close it now, because you're all Tories? And we got, the building is unsafe. But basically, it's a health and safety issue. They kept resorting to that. And it's hard to argue with. I mean, especially if you listen to any of the engineering reports, it's very, very scary what these guys said versus what we were told 2 weeks ago. But I think the premier made a mistake when he was.
Does that make you a little skeptical, though? I mean, truly, because it came out that there was this one area, and then we had public sector or private sector people saying, if it's about this cost, here's the money, right? And then they come back later with all these other costs. I'm sorry, I don't want, obviously, a building to operate when it needs investment and it needs to be fixed. But if they were proposing to have the new, improved, fixed, built, giant mega science center and fabrication plant on that same land for that neighborhood and for the people of Ontario who want it to remain there, I would be open to, okay, maybe it's worse than originally they thought. Maybe, it's worth that longer investment. Maybe I would be open-minded to it if I thought that it wasn't about the fucking land. It feels like it's about the land. And so as long as Doug Ford keeps giving away chunks of land in this province to his pals, I'm going to be skeptical about them suddenly finding all these reasons why the place now seems like it's completely decrepit.
Well, who'd want to build on a beautiful ravine lot in the middle of the city? I can't see it. But that very ravine lot is why the engineers are saying, well, or the report basically is saying, well, we can't work around it. It's too heavily treated. It's like a forest. And all the engineering stuff is up underneath and we can't access it because then, seriously, this report or this review of the original report and its conclusions were so much more damaging. One little thing, they said the only criteria that it's not better to move it to Ontario Place is that there's going to be 33 full-time jobs lost in the changeover, and that just doesn't even get a mention anymore. I know in the hundreds of millions of dollars that's going to be spent here, that might not be a big thing, but this is a premier that wants to, promised right off the bat there'll never be a job lost, and here we are. They're looking at something like $6 million in severance.
When they asked the finance minister the other day on TV about whether or not there'd be job losses with the Lcbo strike, the answer was, I don't know, I can't predict the future. Literally, you have a majority. This is literally your plan and your policy and your action. There was no problem until you decided you wanted to turn this into a privatization scheme. And so you are in the absolute position to give assurances around job losses, because Ford certainly did, right? So, I mean, to your point, Keith, the fact that they said there wouldn't be job losses and now 30 over here, maybe thousands over here with the Lcbo. There is so much lying. And that's why I talked about being choked by the gas of the gaslighting of this Ford government. I don't have an issue really with some areas of privatization. I think there can be a balance between public and private. I ran a chamber of commerce. I've owned a business for 25 years. I get it. There are strengths within the system when things work out in balance. But what we're not getting from this government is the truth. We're not even getting their phone logs. We're paying for lawyers to fight for Ford to keep his phone logs secret. We are constantly trying to get a look at the 95-year secret deal for Ontario Place and the Therm Spa. I mean, this is all within the context of so much bullshit, guys, that while I can see they have a new report over here, this looks more damning, or, the union's got the wrong tactic on this particular line of attack and Ford's ahead of them with that in his map, or whatever. I'm not saying the Ford government is stupid. I think this has been a plan in play for a long time, as Mark has pointed out in previous scandal panels, and they are executing on it with this majority, and they are making their donors happy so that they can continue to remain in power. So I just want for our audience who are outside of Ontario to understand, it's not to me about the individual business case of every single thing that they're trying to do. It's looking at that within the broader context of what their overall goals seem to be, what their secrecy looks like, what IG reports and AG reports and an alleged RCMP investigation are supposed to be looking at. This is not a government that we can trust, but I've gone on long enough. Mark, please.
Well, what struck me today, and Laura, you and I have talked a lot about this. We both come from a comms background, worked in professional communications, and I've worked in government communications. And the thing that got me about this announcement today, I kept saying to myself, why wasn't this presentation? Because I do trust the bureaucrats. I do trust them. They are public servants, and I don't believe that they were put on that screen today to lie on behalf of the Ford government. But why wasn't this part of the original press conference where they said, we need to close Ontario Place down, and they left 2 weeks of a shit show of people rising up and I kept thinking to myself, like, who's running the comms in the premier's office? Because they are either wildly inadequate or they think they're smarter than everybody else. I can't figure out which one it is.
Can I answer that?
That's what I kept thinking.
Let me answer that, because we have the answer, because it came out in a news report, I think by Colin DeMello or someone months ago. They had a breaking news story that said that inside of the Greenbelt scandal, when that came out, the conversation amongst comms, etc., was this will be over in 2 weeks. Right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
there is a belief within that government, from what we have seen from investigations, that we will put up with whatever shit they peddle to us because we like beer so much, or because we're distracted, or because whatever, carbon tax, whatever the hell they're talking about. Somehow the people of Ontario are going to go, okay, yeah, no, just break a promise, take the lungs of the GTA, carve out the Greenbelt, make your friends rich while we all suffer. No, we're over it in 2 weeks, right? So that's the mistake they made on the Greenbelt. And I think that same arrogance, Mark, is playing into some of these other things. Don't give them a full business case. Don't even give them all the details. Let's just tell them there's a problem with the roof. This thing shuts down on Friday. Cancel all the summer programs. Cancel somebody's wedding. They're arrogant as fuck. And I think we're seeing that.
They're testing the limits of nobody believes the premier anymore.
Right.
And this is but this is like, they're actually adding to that damage, right? Because if you don't put, like, this would have been a very easy announcement to make. You watch that technical briefing today. I'm sorry, but I get it. Like, I walk away and I'm like, you know what? Geez, like, God, I want to go tear the friggin' place down now. Like, it sounds like it's friggin' dangerous, right? I mean, not technically, but but I'm like, why wasn't this done at the same time as the announcement, so that you don't get this, I don't believe you, Doug. You're a liar, Doug. No one believes you, Doug. And it just adds fuel to the fire that nobody believes anything the premier is saying. And what also caught me about this, and this is where I think this story will even have more legs, and I hope the media pursues it, is that the same material, this aerated concrete stuff, is used in buildings, schools, all kinds of buildings public buildings throughout the province. And when asked about this, directly, they said, well, we're not as concerned about those buildings because they have 4 walls and we can get at them, right? And I'm just like, that's your answer? You are closing down the science center because you say people are going to die. Like, if anybody goes in there right now, they're going to die. But we're going to allow your kids to go to schools and go to all kinds of other buildings with exactly, like, they're catching themselves in their own batch of bullshit. And and Keith said it best early, that both successive governments bear responsibility for the situation we're in today with the science center. Nobody gets off the blame game here, but this was a gift to the Conservative government, because this gave them a signature, like you said, a signature piece. They dragged it out. They knew this was happening in 2018. They saw the report from 2016. They didn't do anything about it because the plan was always to let this thing crumble to the ground, put out a damning report how everybody's going to die if they ever go step foot near that place again. And we get it down as part of our little, kingdom project, or a salute to the era of Doug Ford, Ontario Place, Science Center, SPOS, oh my God, we were so great. Our time was so great in government. Like, this is just so, I don't know.
Can we give him a freaking football field somewhere in Etobicoke and get it over with? Do we have to lose the Science Center in Ontario Place to this guy?
Hey,
Listen,
John Bosco closed down. They can put it there.
Well, guys, here's the thing, right? Is that the trust with this premier is gone. Now, they might still pull well because, rural Ontario may love the beer and may love seeing the Liberals in the GTA get all whipped up and upset about science. I don't know. I don't know,
Yeah.
but they obviously think that they can come out arrogantly without these business cases, with these secret deals and all this crap. And then if the hue and cry gets past 2 weeks, the magical number, then, oh shit, we better do another press conference and come out with some more meat on the plate. I mean, this is what I feel like we're dealing with. And
Yeah.
the union lead, I just have to say, on the LCBO today, when they asked how long this strike is going to go, made the comment, from what I read, of, well, how long did it take to reverse the Greenbelt? So, I mean, that might be what we're locking in for, guys, on the LCBO, because we know with this government, 2 weeks, oh, they realize they have a problem. 2 months,
And
maybe
why?
get some tears. Go ahead.
But why? Again, why are we having this particular LCBO has never been on strike before?
Right.
It's this government's priorities. And the question, well, as you say, spending hundreds of millions of dollars to advance them by 14 months when we all could have just very comfortably waited. I still do a few radio talk shows at, news talk stations.
Yeah.
I asked the hosts, or they've actually raised with me some of them. No one ever calls in here to our talk shows saying, I need to be able to buy beer at the corner store, or I need, the ready mix. No one. It's just, radio talk shows are forever looking for new things to discuss.
Yeah.
This was not a priority of people in Ontario who were first promised this stuff like 39 years ago by David Peterson. A good forward comms plan would have been to wait for the 40th anniversary, mock the hell out of David Peterson and the Liberals, and stand there with all the stuff at a corner store, which wouldn't have cost us a penny.
Unless you've got pals on the board of the LCBO, pals that you're in business with. We didn't need to have Service Ontario close and move to Staples, did we, guys? We didn't need to fire Canadians and give money to a hedge fund out of New York City, did we, guys? We didn't. That wasn't a priority for anyone in Ontario to do that. These are not the priorities of the people of Ontario. You know what our priorities are? Healthcare, affordable housing. Wait, what? Ford has missed all his housing targets? Go figure. Long-term care, how horrendous that situation is in this province. Autism families, people with disabilities. I mean, there are pressing provincial issues, not Trudeau issues, provincial issues that we need this government to care about. And instead, they waste our time and our energy on shutting down institutions, on secret deals, on these stupid beer contracts that they're breaking for the same groups of people who are donors to their party. This is cronyism at its worst. And my question to you, and I've got to go to you on this, Keith, how is it that these wonderful reporters like Southam and DeMello and others who are really working this Ford beat since the Greenbelt, how is it that they are not saying, where's the RCMP update? What the hell is happening from an investigative point of view on this government? I mean, it feels to me like maybe that RCMP announcement was meant as some sort of a false flag. And I hate to say that. I'm not a conspiracist by nature, but why haven't we heard anything?
I assume that these reporters are making at least weekly calls to the RCMP. And it's the kind of thing where I would get to the point where, after several weeks, I would have established a relationship. Hey, I'm going to be calling every week, and then I would switch to daily.
Right.
And they would say, and again, it's not me. I worked for the Canadian Press at the time, and that's basically every newspaper in the country and every radio and TV station as well. So it's quite a reach. And so I would get calls returned. But that's the only reason why.
And wouldn't you have a counter? I would have a counter on the front page of the Toronto Star saying days since we've heard from the RCMP.
Just update with the story. I would start, and again, I'd give them months or however realistically long before you start going. You know what? And I'd say, I'm going to be writing a story next week that's going to say the RCMP will even acknowledge that there is an investigation, other than that they were handed a file by the OPP. How many months ago now? I can't even recall. A hell of a long time ago, really, for at least an update of. There's nothing here, or there's something here, and we'll be doing some questioning or investigating. We've got nothing at all. So, as I say, I'm assuming, and I know we should never do that, but that at least one or two of the Queen's Park Press Gallery are making regular calls on this to the RCMP.
Well, when people ask me constantly, I shove them off to DeMello and say, ask them. And when we had Kathleen Wynne, the former premier, on, she said that she had heard, inside Queen's Park kind of rumor mill that some of his team were being asked questions by the RCMP, which gave me a flicker of hope and light that there might actually be something going on. And I remember as a journalist, I was a VJ, and I'd show up at a murder scene. I'd try to get a quote from homicide detectives. news. I mean, they don't have to give you updates if they're not ready to. You've got to push and push. I just need to know that the push is happening. And, what do you guys think about the opposition? Because I got to tell you, after what happened in France, thank you, French people and the 200 politicians who stepped aside to make sure they could beat Le Pen in the far right. I posted, it's going to be hard, I think, when Doug Ford calls an election, for Bonnie and for Merritt and for Mike to not either demonstrate that they absolutely can take down this government, or at least reduce them to a minority government, which is more manageable, or they're going to have to show some sort of collaboration, some sort of sacrifice, because the people of France, they get a second ballot, so it clears up what the polling looks like locally. But there's going to be pressure to say, if you just attack each other like Horvath did to Del Duca and let Ford skate in the last election, we're going to be stuck with this. And it is hurting our seniors and our vulnerable populations to the point where we can't just let it go anymore. So what are your thoughts about how the opposition has handled the Lcbo strike, handled the Science Center, handled, following up on the RCMP, which I think they can do, asking for more AG investigations? I mean, Mark, let me go to you. Have you seen from them the level of coordination or attack or anything to suggest that they've got this shit under control?
No, I was looking at Merritt's Twitter account today, and the comms coming out of the NDP is pretty disappointing. They seem to kind of just latch on to the issue of the day, and then they try to run that down the polls or up the polls as far as they can go. And Bonnie's still, I don't know. I'm not seeing enough from her yet to convince me that, they're not. First of all, thankfully in Ontario, we're not facing the existential crisis of trying to vote out of fucking Nazis, right? Right? Like, I mean, the one thing about the Ontario PCs is that they aren't like they're not that, okay?
If the argument is, thank God, they're taking away healthcare, there's seniors languishing in hallways, autism families that can't get service, thousands and thousands of people dying in homelessness or living in homelessness at risk of early death on our streets. But thank God they're not Nazis. If that's where we are, I get your point, Mark, but if that's where we are as a province, holy shit, shake our heads, because that can't be the bar. It can't be the bar.
Well, I think the reality, and I've said this before to you, Laura, is that my experience, if you look back at conservative governments, is that they basically govern as long as they can to make sure that they can set up all of their buddies and their friends in the elite class to take as much of the riches of the land as they can give them before someone else has to come in, and whether it be the NDP or Liberal, and have to then do all of the hard work of fixing and patching the holes, and then being continually attacked for spending too much money. Oh, you're spending too much money on helping people, blah 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 blah. And it's just this fucking vicious cycle where they come in, they rob the store, and then and somebody else comes in, Liberal, NDP, whoever, and then they have to do all the heavy lifting to kind of try to repair the system to some level of normalcy, right? Like, I don't know how anybody in Ontario right now looks around them and says Ontario is a better place today than it was in 2018. There's no fucking way. There's no way. I'm sorry.
But Mark, here's the point.
If you say that, then you're...
And what you just said there about, are you better off than you were in 2018? That's the old Reagan line. It's successful. Yeah. I'm not hearing that from Bonnie. I'm not hearing that from Merritt. It's a good question. They may want to pivot to that question every single time they do one of their daily tactical outrages. The point is that you have to be on the attack constantly. I don't just not want a fascist running Ontario. I don't want someone who's tearing apart the public sector services and the institutions that help the vulnerable survive. And it sounds nice to be a conservative, by the way you paint it, Mark. Why not? I can get money by being pals with this government. My business can do better, except I have a conscience. I have a conscience, and I look around and see people suffering, and I think it's sick. Go ahead, Keith.
There is a glimmer of hope that Ontarians are ready for a change in government. And that was an Angus Reid poll that was released this week. and it pulls all, the popularity of each premier. And Doug Ford is way down. He used to be like 42. He's down to 31%. And Angus Reid says no premier has ever been reelected after having fallen to 31%. So interesting. Again, it's just a poll. We're 2 years away from the scheduled election, maybe less than a year from the one Doug Ford plans. But I think it does show that cumulatively it is adding up. To Mark's point, no, there's not this, we're not trying to chase the Nazis down. So there's a lot of people that feel the Ford government's on the right track because they pay very, very little attention to what's going on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
And they just see, things are going along. I can get this, I can get that. Prices are high. I don't know if that's Doug Ford's fault. Most people just aren't as engaged as we are.
The political system is taking complete advantage of an era of ignorance, of an era where people they've just stopped. And conservatives, I don't know, I don't want to say conservatives, the right has worked for probably a decade to make us all so disenfranchised from the political system that we don't care, and we need to care. And France was hopeful, England was hopeful. People decided, you know what, I do care. So that's my hope.
And I love that. And I thank you so much to Keith Leslie and to Mark Cripps for stepping away from your barbecues and beer, if you can find it, and coming on the Oshow for a special extended scandal panel, because damn it, we needed to, because, it might be the summer months, Mark, but it is when the Lcbo is on its first historic strike. And it is when the Ontario Science Centre is being torn down. And it is when Ontario Place is under threat, although I hear that they've got a bit of a stay on some of the trees coming down, so good for them. But, Ford operates in the summer. The Greenbelt scandal fell in the summer as well. So we're not taking the summer off here on the Oshow. And I thank you so much for being here, guys. Take care. And enjoy your weekend.
Thanks.
Take care.
Bye, everybody.
When you care about current affairs, it's on the Oshow. And when you want to get clear what's going on here, it's on the Oshow. If you like to stay in the know, tune yourself into the Oshow. It's the Oshow. Laura Babcock's the Oshow. With a lot of great guests, she puts them to the test on the Oshow. There's no doubt they'll be calling them out on the Oshow. Stand for something or fall for it all. Ontario, hear the call of the Oshow. It's a podcast, the Oshow. Laura Babcock's the Oshow. Stay informed with the Oshow, Oshow.
Your merch bin.